Hello, everybody. I owe you guys an apology. I'm so sorry that I'm just getting this out to you guys right now. I mean, I've been pretty, transparent that I've been having some family fucking crises the last few months, basically. And, something just really came out of left field. I'm good. Everybody's safe. Everything's okay. It's just that the events, really uproot what is essentially my normal stable schedule and routine, and it was just bad timing that it happened at the beginning of the month, because that's usually when I'm kind of hashing out the majority of the things that I need to get done for work, Patreon being the main priority. On top of that, I think you guys know this, but I have PMDD. I'm sure I've talked about it on here before, but it's just essentially where half of your period cycle, so half of the month every month, really puts you in a dysphoric state. And typically I actually have a pretty good handle on it, because since I'm self-employed, it does give me the wiggle room where if I'm dealing with really awful symptoms, I can just schedule my life around resting when that's going to be, affecting my work. But the thing is, because it puts you in a dysphoric state when I have something also pretty bad happening in my life at the same time, it makes me spiral. And I'm just sorry. I'm ashamed of it. I hate it. I pray every fucking night that this just goes away. It really is so hard for me to deal with. It's half of my fucking month. Every month, that's half of my life is in this state of just sheer chaos and feeling like the world is closing in on me. And I know that you guys have your own lives and probably didn't even fucking realize that I didn't post the monthly thing. So whatever. I just want to say sorry, because you guys are my subscribers. It means a lot to me, and I never want to give the impression that I just don't give a shit, or I'm just, whatever, I'll just post whenever I want. I do try to make an effort to make sure everything gets out there at least the very first of the month, so you have a good general consensus of what the month is going to look like. But let's just get into it. This is going to be the June forecast, just the astrology of what we have going on this month. Also, I don't have them out yet. I'll probably have them out within the next 3 days. It literally might be tonight, but I would say at the very longest the next 3 days. But I'm putting out 6-month reports based off of rising signs. You guys will obviously still be able to use the Patreon discount on that. You'll get 10% off. But you want to go by your rising sign, and it'll give you literally the next 6 months forecast of every month, pretty much down to the day. It'll include every new moon, every full moon, every eclipse, every transit, every aspect. The only reason some days aren't included is because the sky is pretty clear that day. So you have everything you need to know in front of you for the next 6 months. And it can certainly supplement a reading, in the sense that, if you're not able to afford, or you just don't want a bigger, very in-depth one-on-one yet, this is a good outline to start with, because it'll give you the general sort of idea of what's going on based off of your rising sign. I'm using the word supplement rather than replacing, because nothing is going to be able to replace a one-on-one reading, because we don't know your planets and how they're being aspected. But based off of the rising sign, it's going to get as close as it possibly can prior to a personal reading. So I highly suggest them. I'll make sure that I post it on Patreon when they're out, but I'm super excited about it. I think that it'll be really helpful for a lot of people, and it'll be a good tool to teach you about astrology, because everything in the report is explained, and it's pretty long. It's over 100 pages, so you'll have more than enough information to work with. But with that being said, let's look at the astrology for the month. So we just had the full moon in Sagittarius, and that was it kind of was yesterday, but it was also really late on the 3rd, depending on where you are in the world. Full moon in Sag is about honesty. It's about philosophy, perspective. It's the wisdom that you gain through your experiences. Collectively, it has a lot to do with traveling, foreign matters, being very life of the party, out there, curious, wanderlust, somebody who really doesn't like to have boundaries or rules or restrictions. They like to go out there and explore. It's a very fun-loving energy having a full moon here. Full moons being endings, culminating points, full circles, the exposure of things, things coming to light, etc. I think there was a lot of emphasis on not necessarily people scandalously finding things out, I found out my boyfriend cheated on me. It doesn't have to be so scandalous. I think that's the word that I'm looking for, but rather that things just might start clicking in a way where it's making sense and expanding your perspective in a really big way. full moons don't always feel the best because there was a square to Saturn. Having a square to Saturn is going to give us that sort of like uncomfortable, restricting, sort of like, oh, I don't feel like I can fully move and express myself energy. And a full moon in Sagittarius just wants to move. It wants to do everything. It wants to go everywhere. It wants to see everything. It wants to experience everything. And Saturn is like, great, that's cool, but there's things you have to do right now. You have responsibilities, you have priorities, you have a schedule. You can't. It's kind of like a slap on the wrist. Think of when you're growing up and you're a child and you're starting to learn that like you can't just do whatever you want whenever you want to do it, and that like sometimes there's bedtime, sometimes you can't eat that many cookies. You start to get these parameters in your head where too much of a good thing can become a bad thing. And I think that was some of the sort of things that might have come with this full moon, depending on where it is in your chart. I also think too that it might have tapped a little bit more into maybe how we have been restricting or limiting ourselves, not out of a place of punishment, but rather like maybe just digging our head in the sand so much when it comes to like our schedules, our routines, discipline, stuff like that, that we're forgetting like how much time is going by and realizing, oh my God, I'm this age. I want to do these really big things. I don't have that much time. I've been focusing on this the whole time. Like, the internal panic of like wanting to spread yourself so far and so thin, but maybe not even having enough room to do it. It doesn't have to be, a bad thing. It's just it's the same thing as every other new and full moon. It gives us something to work with. It lets us peel back an onion layer and get a little bit closer to what it is that we want, what it is that we're feeling, what the truth is. So there might have been an illumination, there might have been an exposure of information, there might have just been a revelation or an epiphany of like, oh my God, what am I doing? Oh my God, what do I even want? Oh my God, why am I still in this city? That sort of thing. Then yesterday on the 5th, we had Venus entering Leo. I'm so excited for this because I have Venus in Leo. So I just feel at home with it, I'm just like, woohoo, one of my placements are getting illuminated. But Venus is the planet of love, money, beauty, indulgences, things that feel good. It makes me think of how good it feels when like the warmth from the sun is on your skin, when you're, eating your favorite, when you order like the chocolate lava cake after dessert, you're like, fuck it, let's just get it. It has this really warm, slippery, smooth, sort of cozy, indulgent energy, Venus. It's temptation, it is frivolousness, it is it makes me think of when people flirt just to flirt, or they just say, okay, I'm gonna have a piece of the cake, or they're like, you know what, I'm not gonna let my ex ruin my night tonight. Like, it has this sort of, I'm just gonna do what I want sort of energy. And to put it in Leo is very dramatic, it's very creative, so it's actually incredible for creatives. If you do absolutely anything within singing, dancing, art, music, entertainment, comedy, performance, any mode or medium of creativity or putting yourself out there, even like just being a fucking TikToker, posting selfies of yourself, I don't care what it is, you have such a big window and time frame to like really make something of yourself, gain a lot of attention, and really like work that creative muscle. Leo itself does have a lot to do with needing a deeper sense of attention, validation, needing to be affirmed, needing to be celebrated. And Venus in Leo loves being in the sign because it is very much like, give me all that attention. Enough is never enough. Like, please do not stop giving me gifts, giving me attention, giving me compliments. Like, it wants more. It wants to be adored. It wants to be spoiled. It wants to be, I always say this, you guys have probably heard me say this in your own like personal readings, but I always say that Venus in Leo is literally, I do not want to be your girlfriend. I want to be your God. It is like the desire to be worshipped in such a like disgusting level. Now, the retrograde, it's not going to be happening until next month, but the reason it's such a big deal that Venus is here for 4 months is because Venus moves so quickly. She's a very fast moving planet, and she only stays in a sign depending on her transit for like a month or 2 months. And to have 4 there, the reason she's able to hang out there for so long is because she's going to be retrograding, so she's going to look like she's going backwards on the astrological chart, but then she's going to have to make that transit forward again and retrace her steps. So it's going to magnify and kind of extend her stay here. Now, with that being said, it can feel like she is extending her stay towards the end of the transit, and that retrograde, which I'm going to emphasize more next month, can kind of take everything that I just said and now make it something like embarrassing or faulty or vulnerable, or putting yourself out there and then getting humiliated or getting humbled, or maybe needing to realize where you need boundaries with the things that you want, or where not all attention is good attention. We're going to be seeing lessons like that with that, but that's not something that's going to come up until the very end of July, so there's quite some time to deal with that. But just enjoy Venus being here. You might find that you're just feeling more confident, more sexy, more like man-eater, more like not settling for anything, raising your standards, etc. On the 11th, we have Mercury entering Gemini, and then on the same day we have Pluto retrograding back into Capricorn. Mercury is the planet of communication. Also very quick moving planet, a lot faster than Venus, I would say. This is speaking, talking, writing, communication. It's what we're thinking, what we're doing, what our ideas look like, what our conversations have been like lately. Wherever we have Mercury transiting is going to bring some like action, in terms of, maybe action isn't the right word, some stimulation around the area of the chart that it's in. Mercury loves being in Gemini because it's in its sign of rulership, so it functions incredibly cozily here. It really is like at its, it's functioning at its highest capacity, because Gemini is very chatty, it's very cerebral, it's constantly inspired, it's always seeking a new level of stimulation or change. It really likes having multiple objectives to work with, rather than having to focus or commit to one thing at a time. So Mercury being in Gemini can look like the mental chatter hitting a 10. For some people this might be anxiety, overthinking, information overload, being super busy, being super social, having a lot of plans, maybe being overbooked, things like that. But in general, having Mercury in Gemini is usually people like just starting to say yes to plans a little bit more, being a little bit more flexible in their ways of thinking and their perspectives, being more talkative, being more sociable. Having Pluto retrograde back into Capricorn on that same day. Pluto's already been retrograde. And we know that Pluto entered Aquarius on March 7th. So I want you guys to think, not March 7th, March 26th. I want you to think back to March, and especially towards the end of it, and what was starting to hit its peaking moment, what was starting to boil over, what was starting to reach this point of culmination that was almost like something needed to be confronted, or something needed to be pulled from under the rug, or you had to, remove the wool from your eyes. Because we're going to have this revisitation point as Pluto retrogrades back into the 29th degree of Capricorn. The last time it was there was at the very end of March. March as a whole is, perfect to look at, because it ingressed into Aquarius on the 26th, but it was, hanging out at that 29th degree throughout March. So look back to that area of your life, especially in the area of your life that Capricorn rules, because that's where we're backtracking. It's not to say we're losing progress. It's not to say something bad is going to happen. Pluto, especially retrograde, unearths and makes us confront where we have been powerless to something, and where we have to desperately dismantle the power and control dynamics of what we allow ourselves to be so scared of, to run away from, to ignore, to not have to face. What is the big scary monster hiding under the bed, and how do we gain the power to get on our hands and knees and look under the bed and be like, yeah, I'm not fucking afraid of you, get out from underneath the bed. That's what we're kind of dealing with here as it revisits and retraces its steps into something that might have felt a lot bigger in March, and maybe now that some time has passed, you kind of come to peace with it, accepted it, moved on from it, thought about it enough to have a different perspective. And Pluto going back over there is kind of saying, okay, there's still some things that we need to pick up over here. There's still some information that we missed. There's something that we weren't seeing so clearly at the time, and now we need to look at it a little bit deeper. It's gonna take us down another few notches, another few layers into the ground, like Pluto likes to do. And I always say that it has that wrecking ball energy. It's going to destroy anything that was never working to begin with. And if you see something in your life falling apart, it's not because you're getting punished. It's because there's a desperate need to rebuild a solid foundation that won't be so susceptible to tumbling down to begin with. Having Mercury enter Gemini on the same day that Pluto retrogrades back into Capricorn does make me wonder if between a Gemini and Capricorn there will be Mercury and Pluto. Mercury is information, it's announcements, it's exchanges, it's conversations, it's the details of things. Pluto is death and rebirth, it's truth, it's transformation, it's profound change, it is fear and paranoia and tactics that make us scared to move a certain way. So to have those two things so active on the same day does make me wonder if this is like, okay, are we going to hear a shocking announcement? Is there going to be a very powerful conversation? Is there going to be the need to confront something mentally? Are we going to have like a super transformative change in perspective? All of those things can absolutely come up with those two things happening on the same day. On the 17th, we have June stationing retrograde, or what am I saying? June stationing retrograde, Kayla. We have Saturn stationing retrograde in Pisces at 7 degrees. That's Mercury in Gemini, literally speaking a different language and just saying words without thinking. Just no thoughts, just vibes. But on the 17th, okay, Saturn is going to be stationing retrograde. I think people maybe have like a confusing perspective of Saturn stationing retrograde. Retrogrades and planets in general, like, they're not bad. They literally go backwards, seemingly, the illusion of going backwards, and slow us down because they're trying to be like, yo, chill. Like, you still have things to like handle here, or to look at, or to change your perspective, or to like, learn before you screw up by moving too fast. We want to like be grateful and thank the flow of retrograde cycles because they're there to basically say, hold your horses, like, let's get a little bit deeper here before we screw ourselves over. Like, this is going to help you in the long run, even though it's frustrating right now. So typically retrogrades can bring, yes, frustrations, delays, setbacks, but Saturn itself in the direct motion is very assertive and very restrictive and very limiting. It has a lot to do with our rules, with our needing to follow certain parameters, or having a lot of structure, maybe feeling like there's a little bit of a dry spell energy, or a late bloomer energy, or maybe some militant energy around like what we can and can't do, what rules we do and don't have to follow, and where there's like a level of discipline or responsibility that is necessary in order to grow or have good karma in the area that it's transiting. So to have it station retrograde, because Saturn on its own is a malefic planet, which typically gives us a little bit more trouble than it does gifts, at least in terms of instant gratification, the retrograde cycle can sometimes allow Saturn's really harsh influence to kind of loosen its grip on you and almost take its foot off your neck in a way that can feel like a relief more than, oh my god, another planet's retrograde and it's going to give us problems. If anything, this can kind of like, I would say the biggest problem with Saturn going retrograde is that sometimes it can be so chill, or such a sigh of relief, or so like, okay, cool, my foot can kind of be off the gas right now, is that we get lazy, or we start, losing sight of the vision, or, when I always, stick to this saying, and this might be an extremist thing, but like, when I have heard this, I don't know how many years ago, but I had to stick to it because I'm one of those people where like, I can keep the ball rolling with something, but if I fall off and if I don't get up right away, I will stay off. Like, it will be very hard for me to get back into the flow. And I heard somebody say something like, never take 2 days off in a row, or something like that, which again, to some people, like the average person could probably handle that, but for me it's like, yeah, never take 2 days off in a row, because I'll take that one day off, and then that second day, if I'm like, oh, I'll just take another one, I am not getting back on that horse. And I feel like Saturn retrograde can sometimes be that falling off point of, where we were doing an incredible diet and workout routine, and then we went on vacation, but then when we came back from vacation and it was Monday again, we're like, oh, I'll just do it Tuesday. Oh, I'll just do it Thursday. Okay, I'm just going to start next Monday again. And then we realize we're not doing the routine anymore. So sometimes it can kind of slow us in the sense that now we're trying to be like running in quicksand, and it feels like, there's so much pushback or so much resistance, or we're just really dropping the ball so hard that, it's keeping us from, I guess, moving forward as efficiently as we were prior. It doesn't have to be inherently bad, but I would also say that, you just want to keep your head in the game. You want to not be too hard on yourself, but make sure that you're still staying on track. Sometimes karma can be rebalanced with Saturn retrograde too, where, if you have been a good girl, and I'm saying girl as like, the umbrella term for anyone that subscribes to my Patreon. If you've been a good girl, you might see the rewards of things that, have typically given you a lot of issues, and you're starting to finally see the fruits of your labor, finally getting your flowers. In other ways, if you've been really resenting and refusing and procrastinating things that you know better and that you should be doing, this can look like, oops, the consequences are finally setting in. That retrograde period is kind of like resettling things that were maybe, needing to be re-leveled. And it's going to station retrograde at 7 degrees, which is a Libra degree, and Libra itself too has a lot to do with justice and karma and balance and where things need to be leveled out again. So with 7 degrees too having a lot to do with relationships, partnerships, what's fair and what's not, the presence of good and bad, good and evil existing in order to bring meaning to each opposite end of the spectrum. It's going to be at that 7 degrees for a little bit, and I'm wondering if this is maybe more so going to illuminate where people have like escapist or numbing tendencies in terms of their relationships and the people that they choose or don't choose to be with. Because in Pisces has a lot to do with our vices, right? Our addictions, our escapism, how we run away, how we numb the pain, how we ignore the truth, how we romanticize things. And Saturn stationing retrograde there might be that culminating point of like, oh wait, I actually have to face this drinking problem now, or wait, I didn't even realize how much I was like avoidant in this relationship. Things like that. And that 7 degrees might kind of highlight the truth or the need to confront something coming through the vessel of somebody else telling us about ourselves, or somebody else reflecting to us our own problems, or realizing how we play into what is essentially somebody else's problem as well, things like that. On the 18th, the day after that, we have a new moon in Gemini that's going to be at 26 degrees. Let me pull up the chart for that. Actually, I do not have it handy. That's on June 18th. Okay. So new moon in Gemini, exciting. We had that full moon in Sag, so that was going to be the exposure culminating point, ending within perspective, faith, spirituality, studying, travel, education, curiosity, wanting to go far and wide, wanting all these really crazy experiences. And a new moon in Gemini can kind of give us that first foot in the door that allows us the privilege to begin that, or to start a new thing, or to go on a new trip, or to think about a new idea, believe in a new concept, crack open a new book, things like that. It's going to be at 26 degrees, which is a Taurus degree, and Taurus has a lot to do with emotional security as well as financial security and building a very strong foundation. You guys know all about Taurus because that has been where the North Node has been for the last 18 months. So we keep seeing these reoccurring themes of like, how do we build a foundation? How do we build wealth? How do we build stability? How do we build good habits? How do we build something that is unshakable and reliable and is like a rock in our life that we can rely on? So to have that degree within this new moon, it might be something where you're beginning something that's going to be long term, that's going to be long standing, or that's going to provide you that sense of stability. So this could be like beginning to learn a new skill that you're going to monetize in the future, starting to learn about a new starting to read new books that align with something that you really want to incorporate into your lifestyle, starting to take a short trip to somewhere where you want to eventually move and you really just want to get the ball rolling and make sure that you like the place that you have your eye on. Things like that can be present here. It's going to be in a square to Neptune, and is that all that we're dealing with here? It's going to be in a square to Neptune. It'll be loosely sextile Chiron, so there might be some support in terms of highlighting or remediating some sort of pain, trauma, wound, trigger, something that is maybe like a hole or a void within us, and allowing this new moon to be something that can help us confront that, rationalize it, intellectualize it, or get to understand it on a more objective level, like take our ego out of it a little bit. However, that square to Neptune can really cause some confusion, and it can really look like us romanticizing things, having missing information, not seeing things too clearly. It makes me think of the Fool card. It makes me think of like jumping before you look down to make sure you are going to be okay. This doesn't have to be inherently bad. Neptune, yes, can be spiritual, can be open-minded, can be, very, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like very just creative, very open-ended. It can have this really big imagination. It can have these like levels of manifestation that allow us to bring things into life. It has that dreamy sort of romantic, creative energy to it. What's problematic about it is that usually that result of this is so beautiful, this is so ethereal, this is so godlike, this is my soulmate, this is my dream, is that those very vast, larger than life feelings are birthed from what is not seeing something clearly, or having like a misconception, or your perspective being skewed due to something like emotional or something that is maybe hiding in the shadows a little bit. Think of when people are dating the worst person you've ever seen in your life, and they're like, no, you don't get it, this is my soulmate, like, you don't get it because we have this intense love story. And then you're the friend that's like looking at it objectively from the outside in, because you're not the one with the rose-colored lenses, and you're like, dude, this person hates you, it's like the worst person ever, how are you not seeing this? Neptune has that sort of influence where sometimes it's the same reason people get into cults by accident. You don't think you're in a cult, you think you're finally connecting with people, you think something's finally making sense, you think you finally have a strong sense of faith, and it's because you are under this new Neptunian spell, whereas somebody outside of you is like, bro, you have vulnerabilities, you have pain that is making you hopeful over this thing, and you're not realizing that you're in a dangerous position. So because there's an aspect to a new beginning that is touching on wounds, where we maybe have some deficiencies in terms of our feelings, our ego, our independence, our self-image, which can be the most dangerous thing in the world if we allow it to be, and then a square to Neptune, we might be starting things but from a place of insecurity, or from a place of overcompensating, or from a place of, I think I'm supposed to do this, that's what everybody else is doing, I don't want to be behind, so I need to catch up and start this now. So you just want to be very careful that when you whatever foot you're taking forward with this new moon, try to just ask yourself and check in and make sure like this isn't coming from a place of like a wounded ego, or like a deep insecurity, or something around like desperately needing to prove yourself. That's the best advice I can give with this. Best case scenario with a square to Neptune, I would say like you can use it to manifest, you can use it to pray, you can use it to be creative, you can use it to just kind of like dream something up, if you're into like astral projection or like guided dreams and stuff like that, meditations, those things can probably be good to do on that day as well. What else do we have here? I guess it'll be in a sextile to the North Node too, so that's a supportive aspect that we have there as well. I think it's a very good, imaginative, dreamy, like larger than life new moon to have. I do think it's exciting. You just want to make sure you're not like walking down the path that looks really promising and then you're like ending up in hell. Just be careful with watching your step. That is going to be again on the 18th. On the 21st, we have the Sun entering Cancer, and then on the 27th, we have Mercury entering Cancer. So everything's going to be leaving Gemini and making its way into the sign of Cancer. It's going to be Cancer season, and that's going to be leading us up to the summer solstice. So everything going into Cancer is going to make some things warm and cozy. That really sets the tone for summer, I think, Cancer season, because that's when people start to like, it makes me think of when you finish school when you're younger, and Cancer is like, okay, we're back home for the summer, we get to like chill out and have fun at home. So Cancer is very, I'm trying to be careful here because I'm a Cancer, and I hate when people just limit it to like, oh, it's maternal, you're going to be baking cookies for people, you're going to turn into a mom. Like, yeah, okay, Cancer does rule these sort of like maybe domestic home related things, but it's certainly not just limited to those themes. Cancer is really focused on the security of things. Like, it wants to have something reliable, it wants to have a place to come home to, a place to lay your head down, but it also wants it wants a lot of money, it wants a lot of food, it wants a lot of leisure, it wants a lot of the ability to be, very indulgent. It's a cardinal sign, and cardinal signs are very good at initiating, right? They love starting things. They like, starting that finish line, starting an idea, starting a project. They can kind of struggle with maybe keeping the ball rolling and following through and committing to like finishing something all the way through. However, it has that exciting sort of burst of energy where you want to start a new diet, or you're like, I'm going to start saving this amount of money and I'm going to, earn it really quickly, or I'm going to start this new project, and you get that flush of like a wave of excitement and like that visionary sort of thing that comes with it. And I don't think people talk about that part of Cancer, but to have that in the summer, it sort of has this, especially with Venus and Mars and Leo, it makes me think of like people really coming home. And I'm saying that hypothetically because I know we're not in like 8th grade anymore. Like, people don't just have the summers off, but it makes me think of coming home to ourselves and being like, you know what, this is the summer where I get hot, or this is the summer where I get the fuck out of this city, or this is the summer where I'm going to make sure that I save enough to get that dream car that I wanted. It has this sort of coming back to basics, honing in, coming back to the home base, making a plan, initiating it, and that Venus and Leo too, and Mars and Leo is going to help you execute it all the way through. But I just really think people are starting to like stop playing with themselves and almost get like into this very focused main character energy where, you know, people are vision boarding, people are making lists, people are actually following through with the things that they wanted to do for so long and finally put off, or, you know, always put off and are finally getting around to. And this kind of gives you that here's a good saying. I remember somebody saying a long time ago that, how did it go? It was something about how mothering yourself is essentially doing things for yourself today that your future self would thank you for. Like, that is what mothering yourself is. When you think of what, you know, a good mother is when you're younger, it's someone who makes sure that, like, you know, your clothes are picked out for you for school in the morning, or they're up making breakfast for you before you wake up, or they're there when you know that you had a bad day at school and you're going to come home a little bit upset. And remothering yourself has a lot to do with having those pre-planned steps in order to save yourself if you fall in the future, kind of giving yourself that safety net. As an adult, I do this by making sure that I have food made ready for me. So if I have a heavy night of drinking, I can come home and take care of myself. Therefore, I'm not in a really unhealthy position. I refuel myself. I eat something before I go to bed. That way I don't wake up feeling like shit. This also comes up when, you know, I have my PMDD symptoms and I know that I'm going to be having a rougher 2 weeks after what felt like a great 2 weeks. So I have to start, you know, making sure that I do all the things that I don't like doing when I feel really shitty. I make sure that I, you know, make my room really clean, that I make my work a little bit less pressuring to deal with. It's really just preparing yourself for yourself. And I think Cancer season is this sort of, again, like coming back to the drawing board, coming home to yourself. It makes me think of ringing the bell on the farm, being like, dinner's ready, you know, come home for the evening, and you're coming home to yourself in that way and really getting clear on what you want, what will bring you comfort, what will bring you security, what will make you fucking happy. And then the other things in the sky, thankfully, at the same time will allow you to actually physically execute those things. Saturn retrograde, again, in some ways this might help people because it's in Pisces, it's in a water sign, so it's going to be trining these planets one at a time. There's going to be like a need to kind of take yourself a little bit more seriously, be your own parent in a way, get a little bit more stern, get a little bit more disciplined. And I think in terms of like maybe home related, domestic, or like basic needs and resources, our diet, our food, our exercise habits will be something that needs to be chalked up a little bit more seriously in order to see some change happen. And then on the 30th, we have Neptune stationing retrograde in Pisces at 27 degrees. So same with Neptune and Saturn. Neptune isn't necessarily a malefic. It's just the fact that, you know, its most problematic state is giving us a little bit of confusion, misinterpretation, missing information. It's equally addiction, escapism, where we kind of gloss over the details, where we shrug our shoulders when we don't really know the truth to something and just kind of hope it works out, and where we maybe lean into blind faith rather than taking you know, physical, tangible action and steps. So when it goes retrograde, it isn't inherently bad either. If anything, this is usually where we see truth come to light, where we see lies that, you know, were happening behind closed doors just unearthing themselves, where we see things that went unanswered before getting very clear, where something that you know, we might have been in a phase in our life where we were just hazy and a little bit, you know, blurred lines, like we don't really have full memory of something, or we just kind of felt like we were floating through life for a little bit. We can get a wake-up call about that time, or maybe something, you know, slaps us in the face that we weren't able to see before, we didn't have the capacity to see. Neptune tends to blur the lines of, you know, faith versus fact, reality versus what is maybe us making up an illusion in our head. It sort of softens the edges, softens the, you know, corners of what is the truth. So when it goes retrograde, it does sort of allow us to finally pull the curtain back and see like, oh, we might have just been seeing this performance, but this is everything that had to go into it behind the scenes. So I think that in combination of full moon in Sag, new moon in Gemini, we have Mercury and the sun going into Cancer, and Cancer is very psychic and very intuitive too. It knows things. It can see through the bullshit. It knows what's going on, and you need to trust your gut and your intuition when Mercury's in Cancer, because this is something where you'll have a dream and it'll come true, or you'll like just be talking to someone and have that ping in your stomach where you're like, oh my god, they're literally lying to me, and you won't have physical evidence and you won't be able to prove it, but those sort of intuitive downloads that come through with Mercury and Cancer will certainly aid in both Neptune and Saturn going retrograde in Pisces, which is the most spiritual, cathartic, ethereal, psychic, confusing, romanticizing, disillusioned, delusional sign in the zodiac. And to have everything, having the two, we're having Saturn, which is reality all the time and structure all the time and fact all the time, starting to be like, you know what, let's not take things too seriously right now, let's enjoy the summer. We have Neptune, which is normally like, let's just enjoy everything, let's not focus on fact, let's focus on belief, stationing retrograde, slapping us in the face with something. Mercury in Cancer knows what the hell is going on, even if you can't see it with your own eyes. And having that new moon in Gemini too is like a new piece of information. Maybe it's not clear information, it's a new conversation, maybe that's missing some details. There's a lot of picky and choosy energy going on where we're not getting the full picture yet, and I think that throughout June and July that picture is going to get very clear in a way that might be abrupt, might be a wake-up call, or might really like slap us in the face with reality where we have to make a decision. So those are the main things that I see going on for the month. I'm pretty hopeful. I don't think that, I think, like I said, March, intense. April was okay. May was intense. I think June is maybe another buffer month. Pluto retrograding back into Capricorn collectively could absolutely be a huge deal in terms of like politics, finance, the economy, in terms of like what the hell is going on with the banking systems and crypto, a cashless society, all of those things, war. I've talked about that stuff before. I think July is probably more of the war thing that we want to look at. And it seems that this year, every other month tends to be this sort of really big abrupt thing that shakes the table, and then we have a month after that where we get to recalibrate and kind of adapt a little bit. So in your personal lives, enjoy June. I do think it'll smooth the edges a little bit. I think things will maybe start to slow down and we'll get in that hazy sort of summer vibe. July, I would say, is probably a little bit intense. So that's when we're seeing Chiron and Venus station retrograde. The sun's going to be in Leo. The nodes change sign. That's the biggest deal here. We have Mars going to Virgo. There's going to be a full moon in Capricorn. Pluto's going to be retrograde. Like, shit is going to be hitting the fan. So we will talk all about July once she rolls around. But that is what's going on for June. If you guys have any questions or you need me to elaborate on anything, or you just want to talk about your experiences, what you're excited about, what you're worried about for the month, feel free to comment. I really want you guys to have like a sense of community here, because there's enough of you guys in here to like be chatting it up. And I'm like, hello, I want you guys to like interact with one another. That way you can actually feel like, you're making connections. When I first got into astrology, even now, I'm not very involved in the astrology community. I feel like, and this is probably just based off of my own placements, oftentimes I attract a crowd, but I'm never really interacting too much with other creators, not for any reason. It's just like, I learn from them, but there's never that, heavy connection, which is fine. But, as I was learning about astrology growing up and stuff, I was such a quiet learner. I didn't have a Twitter for astrology. I didn't have these accounts for it. I didn't chat with people about it. And I kind of wish I did, because I probably would have made a lot of connections a lot quicker had I just communicated with people or shared my experiences and stuff. A lot of it was just me screenshotting things and then reading them later. So I want you guys to be able to, if you want, use Patreon for that reason, because you might be able to click and make those connections in a way where you're like, holy shit, wait, I did not realize, now that you're saying you went through this during this time and now I'm going through this, what a connection to be made there. So just a suggestion, but I think you guys would like that. I'm gonna make sure I link the reports once they're out. And again, I'll give you guys the discount in case you guys don't know it. It's literally $FAM on checkout. You use that code on my website and it'll give you 10% off. But I love you guys. Thank you again for being so patient. I'm sorry that this got to you guys a little bit late, and thank you for just always being graceful and not giving a shit that sometimes life comes up for me. I love you guys. Enjoy the month and good luck.